Welcome back to another episode of the Funding Blueprint, where we connect with the brightest minds shaping the startup landscape. Today we're joined by a truly multifaceted leader, Gautam Nadella. Gautam brings a unique blend of experience across industries like technology, insurance, and more. His impressive track record includes over 50 deals and a staggering $10 billion in acquisitions, divestitures, and strategic investments. Currently, Gautam leverages his expertise as an operating partner at EQT, guiding their portfolio companies through M&A, fundraising, and growth strategies. Before EQT, Gautam led corporate development at Next Insurance and Blue Cat, fostering partnerships, growth strategies, and acquisitions. Throughout his career, Gautam has held pivotal roles at eBay and Cisco, driving deals and technology enablement. Notably, he also began his journey at McKinsey and Company. Gautam's academic achievements are equally impressive, with degrees from Stanford University and Harvard Business School. Gautam, welcome to the show.
Great. Glad to be on.
Awesome. So I want to get us started here, and I want to ask you, strategic partnerships can be game changers for startups. So from a strategic partnership perspective, what advice do you offer founders in identifying and nurturing strategic alliances that can accelerate their growth strategy?
Great question. I think relationships with others, especially market leaders, is vital for success for any company. From a commercial standpoint, it's important to pick your partners wisely and cultivate those relationships in a way that's a win-win for the long term. I think too often some startups look at larger players, like a Microsoft, for example, as a potential acquirer down the road and create a relationship primarily through that prism. As a result, they can often miss opportunities for short-term gain or even concede certain terms and value that they themselves create to them that may not be advantageous in the long term, or even to, God forbid, another potential buyer as well. If your view is to build a long-term strong business, it's important to structure any partnership around that goal, not simply to get a quick sale of the business. So I think as you think about strategic partnerships as a whole, think of them as one leg of the stool, not as the end goal or a magic bullet.
So you've executed over 50 deals, right? That I believe are totaling up to $10 billion. dollars. Can you share a specific example of a successful deal you spearheaded and the key factors that contributed to its success?
I think on this side, I would target one of the acquisitions I did. And one of the more successful and impactful deals was SourceFire, which was a cybersecurity acquisition we did while I was at Cisco. It ultimately became the bedrock of what is now a much larger and successful cyber business. It was also the first public company deal I worked on, making it very intellectually interesting and exciting. But ultimately, though it was memorable, it was really because it was such a success, both at that time and even more so looking back. I'd say one reason for the success was because of the extensive diligence that we did, both technically on a business front and a commercial side. Collectively, we knew the business inside out even more than we did with some of the smaller acquisitions we did, and knew exactly what it would take for the company itself to succeed inside the mothership of Cisco. On that note, I'd add that our integration planning was second to none in terms of building out a case for the product, for services, for the employees, and anything else you could think of. I can't overstate how impressed I was by the integration team on this one. Another reason for success was picking the right market and doubling down on it at the right time, which at the time was 2013. It's easy to say now that cyber is a strong, hot market, but back then it wasn't so clear, especially how quickly it would grow in the next 10 years. And I guess finally, the last point I'd say is that the core working team of corporate development, the security business unit, and many Cisco executives up to Chambers all worked very well in tandem, which I think is very important for success, both in the deal itself as well as the integration. And everybody was committed in the common goal of making the deal a success.
Having a decade of experience, right? What are some of the biggest challenges that you see early stage companies facing when it comes to particularly growth strategy?
I think it goes without saying that great companies are built on the foundation of many successes. That said, if I had to think of one thing that is critical for success, regardless of industry, I'm going to cheat and pick two. The first is work ethic and grit, especially to build a business that lasts, not simply become the next hot thing. It takes commitment and the right kind of motivation from the founding team to push through the hard times, even when it probably doesn't make sense on a risk adjusted basis. I believe the second element, which is perhaps even more important but a harder art to master, is picking the right trend and wave to ride. You could get into market sizing, TAM, customer need, but all things being equal, it's better to fight with the wind at your back, not slamming you in the face. So I'd say in terms of that, one great example is the number of companies that succeeded in the last cycle in the 2010s, where the fundamental strategy wasn't all that different than some examples that turned out to be failures in the 90s. I mean, think of Webvan and Pets.com versus Instacart and Chewy more recently. In those examples, timing was just one of many dimensions that were needed to ride a great wave.
Awesome. So, you've worked in venture capital before transitioning to being an operating partner. What tends to jump out to you when you're kind of assessing potential clients? What do you focus on the most?
Sure. So, having worked in corporate venture for many years, and of course with many VCs along the way, I'd say picking a winner comes with many things and requires many things for success. But I'd say two particular dimensions come up in my mind. One is betting on a founder and team that can build a great company. The second is identifying an opportunity that's big enough to move the needle realistically for a venture fund. You can get one half of the equation right and do okay, but to truly have a breakout winner or fund returner, you almost always have to have both. In the past few years, this was sometimes not so obvious given the extraordinary growth in multiples and valuations that we saw. However, I believe going forward, increasingly big funds will probably need to bet on only the biggest potential winners to make the economics work. Yeah, I'd say, of course, these firms tend to have the best names, the best networks and resources. So with that, they already have a leg up on smaller competition. But more tactically, betting on a founder is critical and something you can't mess up on. I've seen time and time again that with a bad founder, they can rarely outweigh other advantages that the company has. However, the opposite can be true often, especially given time and support. And I'd also like to add, like many firms at EQT, we like to invest in companies where we have potential to add something unique. This can be perspective on the market, a regional network, or even a strong operating platform like I'm lucky to be part of right now.
So you've mentioned that there is this typical profile of a bad founder. What are some character traits that you think would make up, in essence, a bad founder?
I'd say bad is maybe too strong of a word. I'd say maybe just the right fit for the situation, the industry, and the stage, right? Obviously, every founder has passion, and even the ones that don't succeed aren't necessarily bad. It just takes a lot of, luck as well, right? Timing and some of the things I mentioned before. But some of the things that kind of indicate that there may not be the right fit, one is the ability to hire well. I think hiring a team at any level is an extremely vital skill for a CEO or a top level executive, especially in a growth phase where you're growing faster than sometimes you can even hire. The limiting factor is hiring. I think the second part is understanding how to work with customers and knowing when to pivot and change. These are important skills that too often they're extremely hard to do. Of course, I'll say that up front. But for the existence of a business to continue, often are necessary for a company to pivot. Uber was a great example, moving from black cars to the taxis. Somebody could have been stubborn and stayed in the first market and not adjusted to the second. And there are smaller examples of that all over the place that I think define what makes someone good versus great.
Perfectly said. The future of venture capital is constantly being discussed, right? There's so many new emerging technologies, different aspects of the ecosystem that's impacting venture capital. What significant changes do you foresee in the venture capital landscape over the next 5 to 10 years?
It's a great question. So I came here to the Valley obviously as a student back in '97, and I'd say some of the things I've seen have shown me that change is constant, and we all know that. The VC industry has already gone through very large changes in the past 10 to 15 years alone, but I could say the same thing for the 10 to 15 years before that. And it's always hard to predict the future, but I can confidently say that the next 10 years, I think, will bring even greater change to the industry than even the past few cycles. I also feel strongly that given the recent, up and down cycle, many funds and the overall industry probably became a bit too big too fast for its own good. If you believe that venture can create higher returns to justify the higher risk it takes on, I think, save for a few vintages at the peak of the last cycle, this can still be largely true in aggregate, especially as some of the larger, more established firms continue their success. That said, there aren't enough fund returners or even 3 to 5x returners to support several thousand VCs that have emerged from what used to be a cottage industry and enough to return and justify their models or expected returns. I would say even in the era of higher rates, this is even more true. Finally, I think there's another major change that's coming up, which is the definition of success for many venture firms. For your typical Santo fund, perhaps this may not change much beyond MOIC and IRR, But there will be many other funds around the world that are driven by more than just financial gain. Think of sovereign wealth funds that are looking to develop their economies, diversify away from various forms of energy, for example, or even make good on green promises. I think, having been in corporate venture for many years, I saw that as corporate venture already focuses on more than just IRR, such as the strategic benefit to the parent co. There will be an increasing number of funds and firms with huge pockets, I might add, that are focused on other priorities.
Gotcha. And lastly, if you could leave our audience with one actionable insight or piece of advice, if you will, that has been instrumental in your journey as a venture capitalist, what would it be?
I would say it's a people business. I think that almost everything in life comes back to people, whether it's, family, friends, or work. But I think the venture business in particular is very much a people industry. It comes down to fundamental factors such as trust, relationships, friendships at times, right? Or even collaboration, being able to work in the same room as somebody and be comfortable in that position. So venture, the people that are the best at it are ultimately great people persons. They're not necessarily, the most outgoing or always the most popular person in the room, but they get along and they know how to work with people and achieve great outcomes.
And that concludes another enlightening episode of the Funding Blueprint. A huge thank you to our guest Gautam Nadella for sharing his wealth of knowledge and expertise in the world of startups, venture capital, and corporate development. We hope you found today's discussion insightful and inspiring. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to our podcast for more thought-provoking conversations with industry experts like Gautam. For our listeners interested in learning more about Gautam and EQT Ventures, we'll have their links to this website and social media in the show notes. The Funding Blueprint is produced by me, Abraham Ilyaev, with audio and video editing by Jordell Beja. If you're looking for exceptional sound design or audio/video production work, then get in touch with Jordell. Our contact info can be found in the show notes. Until next time.